America is facing a crisis that cannot be solved without restoring the family. Hello, I'm Apostle Tommy Quick. I am the founder and president of Christian Families Against Destructive Decisions, and I'm excited today because it's the time of year again for the CFAD Family Conference. We are making a shift and unveiling what the Lord has given us that is more than just advocacy, talking about the challenges and praise God, the crisis that the family is in, but also we're going to share God's plan for restoring the family in America. You don't want to miss it. Our theme this year is bringing it home from design to dominion. And you know, God created all things. He created the family. He had a design for it, how it should look, how it should operate, what the fruit of it should be. And we have gotten away from that. But this year, we're going back to the blueprint. We're going back to the design, and we're going to show individuals, families, how to build according to God's design and therefore flourish in life to the point of exercising dominion in the 7 important areas that every family needs to dominate. When I embraced this challenge to restore the family a number of years ago, I was told by someone that I love dearly, a wise gentleman, that I was exposing myself to rejection because the family is no longer of value in America today. But you know, I wasn't looking at myself. I wasn't looking at the impact that it would have upon me. I was responding to the God of the Bible who had called me to this mission. I found out that the mission is biblically based. It is a Latter-day ministry. And you know, when I think about David, and he became king from a shepherd boy. When I think about Samuel becoming the greatest prophet and judge of his time, when I think about, praise God, Abraham becoming the father of children more numerous than the stars, and all these great men made great accomplishments. But you know what? I don't look at them. I look at the God that called and used them in such mighty ways. And in that spirit, I responded to the call of God to fight for the family. And we've been fighting boldly, and God is blessing. Our target is your home, your doorstep, your threshold, because all positive change is going to start at home around the kitchen table instead of in the halls of government. The family under fire. Contemporary critical theory explained. This is going to be very interesting. We know that the family is under fire, but we need to understand how contemporarily so we'll know how to respond from a biblical point of view. We have such an exciting guest in Monique Duson, who is the president of the Center for Biblical Unity, located, headquartered in California, the state of California. She's going to speak to us about this most important and timely message, the family under fire. Contemporary critical theory explained. It is something that we need for biblical clarity, for discernment and courage to fight for our families in this hour. God bless you, Monique. So grateful to have you with us again.
Thank you, Apostle Quick. Hello, CFAD family. It is great to be with you. In today's conversation, we are going to be talking about how contemporary critical theory deconstructs the family. When I am talking about family, I'm talking about the traditional family, the nuclear family, the model of family that we see in Genesis. God created the man and the woman, and then he brings them together and tells them to be fruitful and multiply, to create that family unit of husband and wife and children. You know, every civilization from the beginning has been built around family until ours. We are in a civilizational moment where the family is under attack, where the family is being seen as really not needed and unnecessary. And even more so than that, the family unit is being seen as something that is harmful. In Glenn Sunshine's book, Why You Think the Way You Do, he writes throughout history, in every society without exception, marriage in one form or another has had a privileged place as a means to regulate sexuality so that children would be brought into the world and raised in a stable environment. The family serves a purpose, the family unit serves a purpose. not only to regulate sexuality, and not only so that children are raised in a stable environment, but the family is really the bedrock of society, and the family is what works to create culture. And so we see many uses of the family. The family is not created by accident. The family is part of God's good design for human flourishing. But why is the traditional family under attack? My thesis, or my main point in this conversation, is to show that the contemporary critical theories view the traditional family as a system of power that must be deconstructed for justice to emerge. The contemporary critical theories see the traditional nuclear family as being something that is unjust, that participates in injustice. And so, as we go along, we are going to look at what is contemporary critical theory, how does it reinterpret the family, and how is the deconstruction of the family playing out in culture. So, what is contemporary critical theory? Well, first, I want to say that contemporary critical theory, or the contemporary critical social theories, are a broad approach to understanding society and culture that aim to critique and change society as a whole. Contemporary critical theory, looks into society to find out where are power structures and social injustices happening within society. And how do we change those power structures through social transformation? When a critical theory is developed, it is looking to find out who has power and who doesn't. And how do we shift through transformation, through movement within society? How do we help get power away from the powerful and into the hands of those who do not have power? Another way to look at it would be to say, how are we bringing powerful from the oppressors to the oppressed or the marginalized? Contemporary critical theory, it's an umbrella term, and it really houses many different critical theories like critical race theory, critical queer theory, critical child studies, critical disability studies. There are several different contemporary critical theories. And all of those critical theories seek to understand who has power and who does not. And through social transformation, how are we taking power from the powerful and giving it to the powerless, or to those with like less power, no power? How are we taking it from the oppressors and giving power to the marginalized? When we think of the tenets of contemporary critical theory, there are four that I'm going to go over with you. The first one is a social binary. It's that society is divided into two opposing and often hierarchical groups. You have your dominant or your privileged people, and then you have your subordinate or your marginalized groups. When you think of this, for example, in the area of race, a lot of conversation has gone into the thought of oppressed and oppressor here in America and who those groups are. So when we think of that dividing line or that dichotomy, it would be whites as the oppressors, and then BIPOC, your Black, Indigenous, and people of color, who would be oppressed. To give a better example of exactly what I'm talking about, let's look at the matrix of oppression. The matrix of oppression divides people into their social identity categories and then identifies who the privileged groups are and who the targeted or oppressed groups are. And so, again, when we think about race, the privileged people, those who critical theory and society has deemed to have the most power, would be white people. And those with less or no power would be your Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So, Asian, Black, Latino, and Native peoples. If we were to look at sex, biological men would be those who are deemed to have power, where biological women would be seen as not having power. Critical theory looks or investigates these groups and then says, how do we take power from men and make sure that women have power? An example of this in society today would be believe all women. When we think about race, an example of race would be lift Black voices. We are taking that power away from white voices and wanting to give power to the minority voice. Speaking of power, the second tenet is hegemonic power. A hegemonic power is an unquestioned influence of a dominant idea or a norm within a society that society really just sees as being natural, like it's unquestioned. A lot of what critical theory seeks to do is look at those unquestioned norms within society and question them, deconstruct them. And so, in this talk, we are talking about the deconstruction of the family. Well, family, one man, one woman with children, is seen as an unquestioned dominant idea within society. Critical theory comes in and says, hey, there's some problems with that. How can we come in and deconstruct that? How can we question what is seen as normal or what is largely taken for granted? Many people think about the family in an unquestioned way, or they take family for granted that this is just what people do. Men marry women and then they have babies. Well, is there something better? What are the problems with one man, one woman, children forever? And so critical theory will come in with its own set of lenses and presuppositions and want to deconstruct what may be seen as normal. Now, for us as believers, we would say that this is not only normal, but that this is good, true, and beautiful because the family is something that is instituted by God. And we see that in the very beginning. We see that in the book of Genesis. Tenet number 3 is lived experience. According to critical theory, lived experience gives oppressed people special access to knowledge or truth about their oppression. The example I tend to use when thinking about lived experience is microaggressions. A microaggression is a very small slight of racism that occurs or can occur from a white person to a minority person. Microaggressions can never go from a minority to a white person. And as a minority, I have a special truth or a special access to knowledge to understand when a microaggression has occurred, when a racist act has occurred, that white person may never understand actually occurred. But I know because I'm Black. Let me give you an example. Let's say my ministry partner, Krista, she's white, and we both walk in through a door. Well, I'm behind her. She goes in and she lets the door slam in my face. Well, later on, I have a bit of an attitude and she asks me what's wrong. And I tell her that she let the door slam in my face and that I know that that's racist. She let the door slam in my face because of her unseen or unknown racist acts and racism. And she explains, oh, well, I didn't mean to let the door slam in your face. I apologize. I actually had bags in my hands and I was thinking about something my husband said. Well, I counter that with, you're racist. I know that you're racist. And I know because as a Black person, I know when white people are being racist. Another example, let's say that someone comes up, a white person comes up, and let's say for the sake of argument, I have braids in my hair. And that person comes up and they want to touch my braids. Oh my gosh, I love your braids. Well, touching my hair, touching Black hair is a racist slight. You have allowed your curiosity to get to the best of you, and now you are touching my hair. That is an act of racism. And so I tell the person, please don't touch my hair. That's so racist. How can you touch my hair? And they apologize profusely and they say, wow, I really wasn't trying to be racist. I just really was enamored with your hair. And I love the braids and how you've done it. And it really just is cool. Well, I know because I'm Black that that's a racist slight. There's no investigation. There's no consideration that perhaps the person was doing something else and let the door close, or maybe they didn't know that I don't like having my hair touched. But I don't just have a special insight into someone else's heart. This is where microaggressions fail. We don't have special knowledge or insight as minorities into the heart of someone else to say, I know you did that intentionally. I know that that is an act of racism. We first must investigate. But this is lived experience, and where lived experience breaks down, lived experience says that as minorities, we have a special access to truth about oppression. And tenet number 4 is critical social justice. Critical social justice is a worldview that is rooted deeply within contemporary critical theory, and it sees society as being divided again into privileged groups and targeted groups. But what critical social justice does is it activates. When we think of critical social justice, we should be thinking of the moving piece of critical theory. Social justice is what moves the activism forward in critical theory. Social justice moves. And so contemporary critical theory may be a lot of the academia, the head knowledge, the frameworks, the big words, but social justice brings it down to the community and it activates. And so contemporary critical theory needs critical social justice to be able to move its ideas forward at the ground level. But how does contemporary critical theory reinterpret the family? I appreciate this quote from Frederick Engels from the book The Origin of the Family, because he's quite clear in a lot of what he's thinking in regards to family. Engels was Marxist and was really concerned about economics, but also concerned about how economics shifted the family and the market left on women, especially. And so he writes, the modern monogamous family is founded on the open or disguised domestic slavery of women, and modern society is a mass composed of molecules in the form of monogamous families. In the great majority of cases, the man has to earn a living to support his family, at least among the possessing classes. He thereby obtains a superior position that has no need of any legal special privilege. In the family, he is the bourgeoisie. The woman represents the proletariat. And so what Engels is saying, and what a lot of his position is that women need to be liberated from monogamy. They need to be liberated from monogamous family groups. When we think of one man, one woman, one lifetime, there is the thought that that setup, that situation completely oppresses the woman because now she is confined to the home. She's confined to her husband. He makes the money while she's at home cooking and cleaning and caring for the children. And Engels would have said that this is a form of slavery for women. But scripture says something else, and it's so much better. Again, Engels says, since monogamy was caused by economic conditions, it will disappear when these causes are abolished. A lot of the economic conditions that he was talking about were directly pointed at capitalism. And so as we deconstruct capitalism, the goal then, the end goal would be to deconstruct marriage and family and liberate workers, and even more so liberate women who were confined by the economic conditions that capitalism caused. With the transformation of the means of production into collective property, the monogamous family ceases to be the economic unit of society. So when I started this talk, I said that the family served so many purposes. It was the bedrock of society. It creates culture. Like there are so many uses and needs for the family within a society. When a family is especially designed by God. Well, Ingalls takes issue with this and says that the monogamous family ceases to be the economic unit of society. He is looking to deconstruct the family because the family really upholds and helps to uphold a capitalistic structure. And so, as we deconstruct the family, we are able to deconstruct capitalism. Black Lives Matter is a very Marxist organization. The founders of Black Lives Matter have openly declared that they are Marxists, they are trained Marxists. And so we thought that this statement from them was extremely interesting and telling. I do believe that this has been scrubbed from their website. I believe that we found this, my ministry partner and I found this in 2020 or 2021. And it says, we describe the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended family in villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. You know, I'm a part of a village. I am an aunt. I am not a mom, but I am an aunt. And I serve a very fun and supportive role within my family as part of the village. However, as part of the village, I am not my nephew's mom. I am their aunt. I come alongside to support, to play, to be fun, to give a listening ear, but never to disrupt their nuclear family. Yet this is the goal of Marxism. It was the goal of Marxism when Engels was writing, and it is the goal of Marxism today to disrupt the nuclear family. Okay, so in summary, what we've seen is that God's good design for the family is being turned into a power structure that needs to be deconstructed. It is being turned into or seen as an oppressive force against women. It is something that Ingalls and I believe Black Lives Matter would say needs to be deconstructed for the liberation of women. Now, let's talk about how the deconstruction of the family is playing out in culture. All of these are very real examples of things that I have seen since starting the Center for Biblical Unity and beginning to talk about the deconstruction of the family. I think it's important for us to understand how this is playing out in real time, even if it's not in your neighborhood, because it is coming to your neighborhood. And as adults who care for young people, as wives, mothers, husbands, fathers, aunts and uncles, grandparents, we need to understand what is being talked about in culture so that we can protect our family. Okay, so one of the main ways that the family is being deconstructed is through deconstructing gender. When we think about deconstructing gender, we can think about genital mutilation or gender reassignment surgery. We can think about the education that's currently happening to teach young people that you may be a boy or you may be a girl or you may be something completely different. In the book, 5 Ways to Deconstruct the Gender Binary in Gender Equity, Megan Davis writes, deconstructing the gender binary and revolutionizing the way gender exists in our world are essential to moving the gender equity movement forward. The gender binary is the idea that there are two natural, distinct, complementary genders. Those two genders are man and woman. And I would say, yes, those are the only two genders that exist. The only two, and I would not even use the word genders, I would say sex. There are only two sexes. There are many stereotypes associated with these two genders. To name a few, women always want to be parents. They enjoy wearing dresses and they are too emotional. On the other hand, men don't cry. They are the breadwinners and they participate in sports. These stereotypes put humans into boxes that only serve our division or our erasure. To be clear, gender is an identity that is separate from biological sex or sexual orientation. What Megan is saying here is that gender lives in the mind. It is separate from my biological sex. And it is also separate from my sexual orientation, the way I participate with someone else. So I may be born a biological woman and participate sexually with a biological male, but in my mind, I may be a third category altogether, non binary. Or I may be born a biological woman, have a sexual orientation that is oriented toward women, and in my mind, be non-binary or be something else altogether. There are several gender categories. It is expressed differently by each individual and can mean being man, woman, both, neither, somewhere in between, or something entirely different. Gender is complex and dynamic, and we need to get more comfortable with its breadth of identities, including, but certainly not limited to, gender fluid, agender, androgyne, bigender, demigender, genderqueer, gender nonconforming, cisgender, and transgender. That's a lot. But what I want you to remember is that these ideas are being taught to young people in school. This isn't just something that lives in the realm of academia. The idea that you can be a boy, a girl, or a tree is literally being taught to students in some schools or online. It's important that we understand what gender conversations are happening within our culture so that we can be the first ones to talk to our young people about it. This is a website called Transformative Schools. The transformative schools are schools that are designed with trans children in mind and with a teaching that does not necessarily gender students. It says trans kids deserve trans schools, centering trans joy, envisioning trans futures. We are transformative schools, a progressive education community centering trans joy and social justice. Our mission is to support trans futures by uplifting the lives of trans children, trans educators, and trans families touched by transness. And so this is a real thing. This is not just something, that I made up for this presentation, but it's important for us to understand that the conversation of trans and what it means to be a trans person is very accessible, but also very prevalent in our society. And the goal really is to teach children that, again, you can be a boy, you can be a girl, but you can also be something completely different. Next, there is the idea of liberating childhood, another way to deconstruct the family. When we think about deconstructing the family, liberating childhood looks at how our children impacted or oppressed by being young within their families. In the kingdom of children, a liberation theology. So there is a liberation theology for children that is specifically seeking to liberate children. It says, unlike minority groups and the poor, children can never gain equal access to power as children. As long as a child is a child, she or he will never have access to power or resources equal to adults. The disadvantaged status of children can never be erased, although its significance in relationships can be transformed. So now I want to bring you all the way back to the beginning when we talked about critical theory and how critical theory itself looks into society to see who are the powerful and who are those who are marginalized and oppressed. And then it seeks to transform society, to have a social transformation where all people would have power. When we think about childhood liberation or liberating children, what power are we seeking to give children? How much power can a child actually have? These are the questions that we should consider when thinking about liberating childhood. I can tell you now that some people would say, well, children should be able to consent to the sexual relationships they want to have. Children should be able to vote. Children should be able to choose their bedtime and choose the school that they want to go to, choose their friends. And so we should be asking, what does this mean? What do you mean you want to liberate my child? Liberate my child from who? We also have to remember that if children are the marginalized, who are the oppressors? That would be adults. And so, as this idea of liberating childhood moves forward within our society, remember that as parents, scripture tells us how we as parents, or how you as parents, should be participating with your child. You are the ones who oversee your home. You are the ones who educate your children. You are the ones who protect your children. Government was never meant to come in to raise our children. So there's a lot of questions to be asked when it comes to liberating childhood. Again, in The Kingdom of Children, a liberation theology, the author says, in many ways, we treat children as almost subhuman. It is all the ways in which we do not value children and mistreat children that make up the idea of childism. Childism, it's like racism, is prejudice and discrimination against children. Childism is both passive and active hatred of children, whether due to their smallness or their neediness or their loudness. Like other forms of oppression, childism can take personal form, like one specific adult hurting one specific child, or a structural form, like laws that systematically treat children unfairly. I want to be very clear. I am in no way denying that child abuse happens. I clearly understand that child abuse happens. And when child abuse happens, as adults, we must step in. However, not everything is child abuse. As we rear our kids and set boundaries for our children, that is not abuse. Also, when we think about laws that systematically treat children unfairly, one of the first ones that comes to mind is something like a curfew law. Is a curfew law really treating a child unfairly, or is it having a boundary for the safety of that child? We must consider the ways in which some people want to participate with our child or with our children, and make sure that as the adults, we are always the ones who are speaking up for the good of our children. The National Youth Rights Association on their website has a category called Young and Oppressed. These are a group of kids and adults who see youth and the age and stage of youthfulness as being an oppressive stage. They say while most common oppressions, such as sexism, racism, classism, heterosexism, and even speciesism, have been identified, widely acknowledged, thoroughly discussed, and deeply analyzed, one oppression remains largely untouched. This fact is astonishing given the group oppressed by this ignored injustice is one to which every adult human has once belonged. It is the oppression with which all humans can identify, having suffered from it directly. It is not an oppression of a tiny minority to which few will ever belong. It is not the oppression of people who can be blamed themselves by any stretch of the imagination. For being among the oppressed group is that of young people, all young people. And so the National Youth Rights Association is really trying to take a stand for youth and creating a special category that says all youth are oppressed. Let's take a look at the chart that I showed you early on, the matrix of oppression. When we look at the social identity categories, if you go all the way down to the bottom and you glance down at age, who are the privileged in that category? Adults. And who are the oppressed? It would be elders and young people. Now, my personal opinion is that they've only thrown the elderly in there so that it doesn't really look like they're trying to target your children. But in reality, not a lot of people are talking about elder abuse or the oppression of the elderly. This is largely focused on how do we liberate children from the rule control of their parents. The next way in which the family is being deconstructed is through government led parenting. I am from the state of California, and California sadly became the first sanctuary state for transgender youth seeking what some are calling medical care. I would call it genital mutilation. What this means is that if a child identifies as non binary, transgender, and they want to have gender reassignment surgery, genital mutilation, and their parents say, absolutely not, we're not doing that, that child can flee to California and seek refuge there. They can go and get help from social workers there, get help from the police, our legal system, so that their parents cannot prevent them from having gender reassignment surgery. It says California is the first state in the nation to create a sanctuary for transgender youth seeking gender affirming care. In California, we believe in equality and acceptance. We believe that no one should be prosecuted or persecuted for getting the care they need, including gender affirming care. Now, this also works in situations where perhaps a mother and father disagree on whether they believe their child should have gender reassignment surgery. So let's say the mother is all in favor, the father says absolutely not. If that mother flees with her child under that circumstance, it would not be seen as kidnapping. It would not be seen as taking your kid across state lines without, the supervision or the acceptance, so to speak, of the other parent. It would be seen as doing what is best for your child and really working to keep your child safe. Another way that the family is being deconstructed is the idea of chosen families or found families, where instead of staying with my biological family or maintaining relationship with my biological family, my biological parents, I move away from those people. I move away from relationship with those people, and I specifically choose the people that I want to be my family, breaking down again that core nuclear family. Another way that the deconstruction of the family is happening in real time is through reproductive justice. Reproductive justice is just a euphemism for abortion. Abortion, when we really think about abortion and the killing of the unborn, persons in the womb who are minding their own business, being murdered. It is a horrible atrocity. And yet, it is the way that many contemporary critical theorists believe that we can liberate the woman. Again, when we think about contemporary critical theory, when we think about Marxism, part of the goal is to liberate women. And so if I find myself pregnant and I want to be liberated, the most liberating thing I can do is to choose my body. My body, my choice. That is the ultimate in liberation. I think it is the ultimate demonic thing that someone can do. But according to the theory itself, it is a form of justice. And it is something that when we think about social justice and that activating arm within critical theory, it is something that a critical theorist would say that we should fight for. We should fight for women to be liberated from the patriarchy, to be able to choose her own body, to be able to choose to have an abortion. And so when we think of states like New York, where a few years ago, more Black babies were aborted than there were born, we should really be thinking about, how do we stand for family? How do I stand for the child in the womb, the innocent child in the womb? Because without children, our society is doomed. We need children to grow up to become adults. And so reproductive justice is just another way in which the contemporary critical theory and critical theorists seek to liberate women and to fight for justice. I mentioned that these ideas of deconstructing gender are also taught in schools. And I generally get met with pushback of that's not in my school. And if it's not in your school, praise God for that. But it is in some schools. And I would say it's in more schools than what people actually realize. And so I wanted to show you the genderbread person so you can see in real time how the conversation of gender gets talked about with young kids, even young kids as young as 5, 6 years old in kindergarten. And so when we think about gender identity, again, gender identity is what lives in my mind. And so I can be on one end a woman, but I can also on the other end be a man. But right in the center, along that spectrum, there's also the gender queer, those who don't identify as a male or a female. Gender expression would be feminine or masculine. And then you have androgynous, those who do not find themselves expressing their gender as male or female, or maybe at times they express both things simultaneously. You have biological sex as male or female. You also have the reality of intersex peoples, but truly, intersex peoples very rarely fall along the thought process of genderqueer or of non-binary people or of transgender overall. And from what I've read and seen online, intersex people generally don't like to be clumped in with the LGBTQ plus community. And then we have sexual orientation. So you can be heterosexual, you can be homosexual, and you can be bisexual. I will say that there are an entire line of sexual orientations that are also listed, but for the simplicity of kids, this is largely what is used. And my last example is from an educating for equity group online, and they like to talk a lot about being allies with their students. How do they show up as partners with their students to understand the journey of the students, but also to really step in when we think about that village? A lot of people who want to participate as allies with kids want to step into that village community, but they often want to do that without parents actually knowing. And so this is from a contributor, Rebecca Williams, and she is talking about being an ally with kindergartners. She says, in my 20 plus years as an early childhood educator, I have found that talking to 4 and 5-year-olds about being a really good friend, being an ally, is one of the most important things that I can do. In my kindergarten classroom, we define ally as someone who supports or stands up for you. We spend a lot of time talking about what it means and why it is not only important, but crucial to creating and sustaining a just and fair world. This is a very simple way that teachers begin to have what I would consider inappropriate conversations with young people. While it may seem all fine and well to have a conversation about what does it mean to be a really good friend, being a really good friend and being an ally are two very distinct things. When we are really good friends, I can tell you if something is wrong. Being an ally, when I see something that is clearly wrong, could also make me a 4 or 5-year-old bigot. We have to be careful about the terms that we are allowing our kids to learn and to use, and the teachers that are even teaching our kids these terms. A question that I would ask is, if my child was being taught about allyship and, came home, mommy, I learned a new word, it's ally. My question to the teacher would be, help me understand your definition of an ally. What does that mean to you? How are you teaching that to my child? Because as an adult, I understand that an ally is someone who supports everything LGBTQ plus, all through all of the letters. It is someone who supports gender reassignment surgery. It is someone who will support a child who decides to cut off their relationship with their parents. An ally, essentially, as they grow, as children grow, will be someone who will support someone wholeheartedly without questioning whether something is scriptural, Christ like, righteous, good, true, or beautiful. And as adults, it's our responsibility, one, to disciple our kids to make sure that they understand these things, but two, to protect our kids from teachers who may want to, even out of a good heart, train our children to be allies. And so, with that, I just want to say thank you for taking time out to learn about how the critical theory, contemporary critical theories, are seeking to deconstruct the family and why. If you walk away with nothing else from this conversation, walk away with the reality that as adults, it is our job to protect our kids. The deconstruction of the family will really rely on how strongly society can get to our kids. That I hope you have a very blessed day. Bye-bye.